Have you ever wondered why some family gatherings feel increasingly awkward as you age? Or why your grandchildren's calls have gotten shorter? After 40 years of working with adults over 50, I've discovered something remarkable. There are 12 subtle habits we develop that quietly push people away, habits no one will ever mention to our face. These aren't about your appearance or wisdom, but rather small behavioral blind spots that can dim your dignity and strain your relationships without you realizing it. The good news? Once you recognize these patterns, they're surprisingly easy to change. Stay with me until the end. The fifth habit shocked even me, and the solutions I'll share can transform how others experience you. If you're watching, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Drop it in the comments below and hit that subscribe button for more insights that everyone thinks, but no one says. Let's start with perhaps the most obvious yet rarely discussed habit that affects how others perceive you. 1. Neglecting personal hygiene. Martha from Cleveland called me in tears last month. Her grandchildren visited for Sunday dinner but left after just an hour. They said they had homework, but I saw them at McDonald's later, she confessed. No one will tell me, but I think it's because my house smells. Maybe I do too. That call broke my heart because Martha isn't alone. As we age, our senses of smell and sight gradually dim. That coffee stain on our shirt? We might not notice it. That slight body odor? Our nose doesn't catch it anymore. Yet these subtle hygiene cues speak volumes to others who won't say a word out of respect. I've seen how family members respond. They sit a little farther away, visits grow shorter, hugs become less frequent. All while wondering, doesn't Dad notice his shirt hasn't been changed in days? Or why doesn't Grandma brush her hair anymore? The truth is, energy levels drop as we age, and when joints ache, tasks like showering can feel mountainous. Depression can also make self-care feel pointless. But here's my gentle suggestion. Create a simple 15-minute morning routine. Fresh clothes daily, a quick wash at the sink, a touch of deodorant, and tidy hair can transform how others respond to you. One client, Bill, noticed his daughter started inviting him to dinner more often after he adopted this routine. It wasn't about looking perfect, he told me. It was about showing I still cared enough to try. 2. Speaking without a filter. Last Christmas, my friend Richard proudly announced to his 16-year-old granddaughter, "You've finally lost that baby fat. You're looking so much better now." The room fell silent. His granddaughter smiled politely, but later confided she didn't want to visit him anymore. Richard was genuinely shocked. He thought he was paying her a compliment. With age often comes a certain freedom, the liberation of saying exactly what's on our mind. I've earned the right to speak my truth, many tell me. I'm just being honest. But what feels like refreshing candor to us can land like a hammer blow to others. There's a profound difference between honesty and unfiltered commentary. One creates connection. The other often leads to quiet withdrawal. You might notice family members changing the subject, shorter phone calls, or fewer invitations, all while you wonder why people seem more distant these days. The simplest remedy I've found is what I call the 3-second pause. Before speaking, take 3 seconds to ask yourself, is this helpful? Is this kind? This brief moment allows your wisdom, not just your opinion, to guide your words. A retired teacher named Grace told me this approach transformed her relationship with her adult children. I realized I was constantly correcting them about how they parent, she said. Now I ask myself if my comment will strengthen our bond or strain it. Most times, I find the strain isn't worth it. By choosing kindness over blunt honesty, you don't compromise your authenticity. You actually enhance your influence. People lean in to hear the thoughts of someone who speaks with compassion. 3. wearing ill-fitting or outdated clothes. Tom, a 72-year-old retired engineer, couldn't understand why his grandchildren never asked him to attend their school events. During a heart-to-heart, his daughter gently suggested he might consider updating his wardrobe. "Dad, you're still wearing pants from 1985 that hang off you now, and those stretched-out sweaters make you look neglected." Though initially hurt, Tom decided to experiment. He replaced his baggy, decades-old clothes with just 3 new, well-fitting outfits. The change in how people treated him was immediate and profound. Our clothes tell a story about how we see ourselves. It's not about fashion trends or dressing young. It's about wearing clothes that fit your current body and show you're still engaged with life. When we hold on to ill-fitting clothes, pants that sag, shirts with permanent stains, shoes worn down at the heels, we unintentionally signal disconnection. The psychological attachment to old clothes runs deep. They connect us to our younger selves, feel broken in, and represent times when our bodies might have been different. But clinging to them can subtly isolate us. Creating a simple capsule wardrobe works wonders. Focus on just 8 to 10 quality pieces that fit well now. Mary from Boston tells me, "I donated 3 garbage bags of old clothes and bought 5 new outfits that actually fit. My confidence soared, and suddenly my neighbor started inviting me to her weekly card games." Remember, this isn't about vanity. It's about self-respect. When you dress like someone who values themselves, others follow your lead. 4. Interrupting or dominating conversations. Last Thanksgiving, I watched my brother-in-law Bob hold court at the dinner table for 45 solid minutes. Each time someone tried to speak, he'd say, "That reminds me," and launch into another story. I noticed his college-age grandchildren exchanging glances, then quietly slipping away to the basement. Later, they admitted they avoid talking to Grandpa because he never actually listens. Sound familiar? After decades of life experience, we have countless stories and insights to share. The problem isn't the wisdom, it's the delivery system. When conversations become one-person shows, even the most fascinating stories lose their magic. Most people won't directly tell you you're talking too much. Instead, they develop subtle avoidance strategies. Shorter phone calls, sudden errands to run, or that glazed look that indicates they've mentally checked out while nodding politely. The root cause often isn't selfishness, but something more poignant, a deep human need to feel heard and valued, especially as we age and sometimes feel less visible in society. Try what I call the 70-30 principle. Listen for 70% of any conversation and speak for just 30%. When someone is talking, focus completely on understanding them rather than preparing your response. Ask follow-up questions that help them expand their thoughts instead of shifting to your experience. James, a widower from Denver, told me this approach transformed his relationship with his adult children. "I realized I was so busy telling them how to live that I never learned who they were becoming," he reflected. "Now they call me more often because they know I'll actually listen." The paradox? The less you dominate conversations, the more weight your words carry when you do speak. 5. Criticizing younger generations. When my grandmother starts a sentence with "kids" these days, I instantly tune out, confessed 19-year-old Sophia. "It feels like she's not interested in understanding my world. She just wants to tell me everything wrong with it." It's perhaps the most universal habit across generations, looking at younger people and finding them lacking. In my day, we respected our elders. These kids have it so easy with their technology. Nobody wants to work hard anymore. This critical stance feels justified. After all, we navigated life without smartphones, faced different hardships, and turned out fine. But when criticism becomes our default lens, it creates an invisible wall between generations. Young people rarely argue back. Instead, they simply share less of their lives, offering surface-level conversation while keeping their real thoughts, struggles, and dreams to themselves. The relationship grows increasingly shallow as meaningful exchange disappears. Try this perspective shift. Approach younger generations with genuine curiosity instead of criticism. Rather than stating how things were better back then, ask questions. How does dating work with these apps? Or, what challenges do you face that you think my generation doesn't understand? Stanley, a 75-year-old former principal, told me how this approach transformed his relationship with his teenage grandchildren. Instead of lecturing them about screen time, I asked them to show me what makes TikTok so appealing. Not only did I actually enjoy it, but they now see me as someone who respects their world instead of dismissing it. When you approach differences with curiosity rather than judgment, you become a bridge across generations rather than a barrier. 6. Oversharing medical problems. "How are you doing, Dad?" asked Mary during her weekly call. 45 minutes later, she had heard about his blood pressure readings, bowel movements, joint pain, doctor appointments, medication side effects, and detailed descriptions of his latest medical procedures. Mary loves her father deeply, but dreads these calls, knowing any conversation will inevitably center around his health concerns. We all face health challenges as we age. That's a natural part of life. The trouble begins when medical updates become the centerpiece of every interaction, transforming relationships into something resembling a clinical consultation rather than a meaningful connection. Most people won't tell you directly that your health discussions are overwhelming them. Instead, they'll call less frequently, change the subject, or offer quick solutions to end the conversation. This is especially true for adult children who may feel helpless or anxious about your health. The psychology behind this habit is understandable. Health concerns are genuinely important, and discussing them offers validation of real struggles. But when every conversation revolves around medical issues, you unintentionally reduce yourself to your ailments rather than the full, complex person you are. Try what I call the 1-3-5 rule. Spend 1 minute on health updates, 3 minutes asking about others, and 5 minutes on something interesting, a book you're reading, a show you enjoyed, or a memory you cherish. Elaine from Phoenix adopted this approach after noticing her grandchildren's visits growing shorter. "Now I save medical talk for my doctor," she says. "With family, I focus on their lives and share things that bring joy. They stay longer now, and I feel more like myself, not just a collection of symptoms." Remember, you are so much more than your health challenges. 7. Stubbornness about outdated beliefs. At 75, my friend Walter insisted that online banking was just a fad, dangerous and unnecessary. "I've used paper checks for 50 years without problems," he'd declare. His children eventually stopped suggesting alternatives. But when Walter's mobility declined after knee surgery, those weekly bank trips became painful ordeals. It was his 12-year-old grandson who broke through. "Grandpa, could we try an experiment together?" That simple invitation, framed as an adventure rather than a correction, opened the door. Today, Walter manages finances from his armchair and admits, "I wasted years making things harder for myself." There's comfort in the familiar, in beliefs and routines that have served us for decades. Phrases like, "I've always done it this way," become shields against a changing world. Yet clinging to outdated viewpoints quietly isolates us. Family members stop sharing new ideas, and we're gradually excluded from meaningful decisions. Try the "what if" approach. What if I tried this once, just as an experiment? This frames change as exploration rather than commitment. Ruth, once firmly against therapy despite struggling with grief, agreed to just one session. 3 months later, she told me, being willing to question one belief gave me my life back. 8. Lack of spatial awareness. Last month at the grocery store, I watched as shoppers navigated around an older gentleman who had stopped his cart perpendicular to the aisle, creating a roadblock while studying a label. Nobody said anything. They just maneuvered around him with barely concealed sighs. He remained completely unaware. As we age, our peripheral vision narrows and our awareness of surrounding space diminishes. We might stand longer at the top of escalators, stop abruptly in walkways, or move slower through doorways, all normal changes that impact those around us. Few people will directly point this out. Instead, they'll walk a different route to avoid you or develop a subconscious association of frustration with older adults. Dr. Michael Liu, a gerontologist, explains that these changes stem from natural shifts in sensory processing. It's not about consideration, he notes. The spatial processing centers in our brain work differently as we age. Simple awareness is the first step. Try occasionally asking yourself, am I creating a path for others to move around me? Position yourself to one side of walkways rather than the center. Eileen made it a habit to mentally check her surroundings while shopping. I actually feel more confident now, she says. Instead of people seeming randomly impatient, I understand the flow of shared spaces better. 9. Making outdated jokes or comments. And then I told him, that's what happens when you hire a woman to do a man's job. Frank finished his joke, expecting chuckles. Instead, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. His new neighbor smiled tightly and soon made an excuse to leave. Later, Frank learned she was a retired construction company executive. Humor evolves over time, and jokes that were workplace staples in the 1970s can land very differently today. Comments about ethnicity, gender roles, or physical appearances might have seemed harmless decades ago, but now create instant social barriers. Most people won't directly call you out. Instead, they'll create distance, declining invitations, or keeping conversations brief. Howard, a 77-year-old, couldn't figure out why his grandchildren seemed uncomfortable around him. His daughter finally explained that his harmless jokes about accents made the kids embarrassed, especially since they had diverse friend groups. I had to recognize that being funny didn't mean poking at differences, Howard told me. He started watching modern comedy shows and observing what makes his grandchildren laugh. Now I make jokes about my own foibles or universal human quirks. My grandkids actually think I'm funny now, for the right reasons. The ability to refresh your humor doesn't mean losing your personality. It means ensuring your wit brings people closer rather than pushing them away. 10. Feigning helplessness. Dad, can you help me set up this new phone? Sarah asked. Oh, honey, I can't figure out these gadgets. You know I'm hopeless with technology, he replied. What seemed harmless was actually the 10th time that week he'd claimed inability to handle something he could learn. Psychologist Dr. Martinez calls this strategic helplessness, when we exaggerate our inability to complete tasks. It begins innocently, perhaps with genuine challenges with new technology. But it can expand to include tasks we're perfectly capable of handling. The hidden cost? Family members start seeing you as less capable than you actually are. They may begin making decisions for you rather than with you. Over time, this erodes your independence. What drives this behavior? Often it's fear of failure, embarrassment about learning something new, or simply desire for attention. These are human needs, but meeting them through feigned helplessness ultimately backfires. Dorothy, a 68-year-old widow, noticed her children taking over more tasks. They started speaking to me like I was a child, she confessed. She began challenging herself to learn new skills. Now I say, I'm still figuring this out, instead of, I can't do this. The shift in how they treat me is remarkable. Try adopting a learner's mindset. Approach challenges with curiosity rather than immediate surrender. Local libraries offer classes specifically for seniors on everything from smartphones to online banking. 11. Negative or constant complaining. I'll never forget watching Margaret at her granddaughter's graduation party. While everyone celebrated, Margaret moved from group to group, commenting on the uncomfortable chairs, the too sweet cake, the warm weather, and how graduations were better back in her day. I noticed people's expressions shift when they saw her approaching, bracing themselves rather than welcoming her. Negative commentary can become such a habit that we don't even recognize it anymore. The weather is never quite right. Service isn't what it used to be. Prices are too high. When pessimism becomes our default lens, it colors every interaction. Research shows that people instinctively create emotional distance from chronic complainers as self-protection. Your loved ones may not tell you that your negativity is draining, but they'll protect themselves by keeping conversations brief. This habit often stems from legitimate concerns. The world is changing rapidly, and many changes are challenging. Physical discomfort and loss can further darken our perspective. Yet constant verbalization of these frustrations comes at a steep social cost. Try complaint fasting. Commit to 24 hours without a single complaint. Instead, deliberately notice what's working well. Barbara, a naturally pessimistic 70-year-old, tried this approach during a family weekend. It was shockingly difficult, she admitted, but my daughter-in-law actually sat next to me at dinner instead of across the room. The 3-to-1 rule also works. For every negative observation, find 3 positive ones. This isn't about forced positivity, but rather maintaining perspective. 12. Insisting on always being right. That's not how it happened, Henry interrupted his son mid-story during a family dinner. Let me tell you how it really went. As Henry launched into his version, I watched his son's face fall and the energy drain from the table. By the time Henry finished his correction, the conversation had shifted to safer topics. After decades of experience, being right can feel like earned currency. Why shouldn't your perspective prevail? The need to correct often comes from a good place. You value accuracy. You've earned your knowledge through years of experience. Yet this habit silently damages relationships. Family members may share less, choose topics carefully, or preface thoughts with, "You probably disagree, but..." They're protecting themselves from being publicly corrected. The deeper need here isn't about factual accuracy. It's about feeling respected. When we insist on being right, we're often saying, "My experience matters." June, a retired professor, recognized this pattern after her daughter confessed she felt graded during every conversation. "I was treating discussions like academic debates to be won, rather than connections to be built," June told me. She developed a new approach, asking curious questions instead of making definitive statements. Rather than saying, "That's wrong, here's why." Try, "That's interesting, I've seen it differently. How did you come to that view?" Remember, in most social situations, connection matters more than correction. These 12 habits aren't character flaws, but simply blind spots that affect how others experience us. Even small adjustments can profoundly strengthen your connections. Start with just one habit that resonated most strongly. Focus there for 2 weeks and notice how relationships improve. This journey isn't about achieving perfection. It's about removing invisible barriers to connections you deeply value. Your wisdom and experience are treasures. These adjustments simply help others receive them more fully. Which habit did you recognize in yourself? Share below. Aging with grace isn't about looking younger. It's about being fully seen and loved for the remarkable person you are.